A Passion for Mushrooms by Chrononautical. Chapter 16. A Gift is Given. When Thorin confirmed 3 times during breakfast that Bilbo would be joining the dancing in the Hall of Kings after dinner to celebrate the opening of a new shaft in Beaufort's mine, the hobbit was more than suspicious. Dwarves were not a subtle people as a rule. However, with no reason to suspect ill from his friends, and no desire to spoil whatever joke they wanted to play, he went along with a willing heart. Anyway, he loved dancing. Dwarven dancing was more about showing off than the merry jigging of a hobbit dance. Precisely tossing Bilbo's dishes about at Bag End had only been the smallest demonstration of what they enjoyed. In their own halls, they stomped, twirled, tossed each other about, juggled knives, and made many wonderful shows of strength and skill. After learning early on which songs it was best to stand to one side and observe, one of Bilbo's greatest joys in Erebor was to join the fun. Often this led to him being tossed about by his friends like a ceramic plate, but they always caught him and made him look a proper tumbler when they did. Thorin, however, did not often attend dances. He said it was because he did not like to make his people self-conscious in the presence of their king, and because he was too busy. Secretly, Bilbo suspected the dwarf might simply be afraid to appear foolish. That night he attended, though. That night he danced. Leaning against the statue of some king he could not name, trying to catch his breath after a particularly intricate square dance, Bilbo heard the opening chords of one of the songs he knew well to avoid. In the center of the golden dance floor, he saw 2 dwarves with flowing dark hair rushing toward one another. As they raced past each other, they locked elbows and fell to the ground, the force of the collision stopping them. Then together they rose from the gold. What followed was one of the most impressive displays of athleticism and strength Bilbo had ever seen. In perfect time with the music, they flipped, fought, and lifted one another up. It was only when one dwarf was upside down, her body perfectly straight and supported by one open palm, as the dwarf beneath her danced a complicated jig while holding the full weight of her pose in a single hand, that Bilbo saw their faces. Thorin was dancing a jig, supporting his sister with a single hand held just above his shoulder. Dis was doing that amazing handstand, staying perfectly steady as the one beneath her bounced in time with the music. Watching the royal siblings dance was incredible. Beyond the feat of skill and strength, Bilbo was suddenly struck by the fact that they were siblings. They must have danced together often, long ago, before the Hall of Kings had a golden floor. Before they assumed the responsibility of leading a destitute people to hope, they must have spent hours practicing together. It filled his heart with gladness to see them dance so freely, and he was not alone. The cheers that came after their display were deafening. Yet the incredible dancing of Thorin and Dis was soon surpassed by another dance. In a quiet moment, as some of the musicians seemed to rest, a single flute took up a lofty melody that reminded Bilbo very much of Elrond's house in Rivendell. Looking among the musicians, he saw Beaufort playing it. Apparently others did as well. Upon remembering that the night was Beaufort's celebration, no one grumbled. That may only have been because no one knew what was happening until Tauriel started to dance. The elf still had a large bandage on her face from the fight with Dis, but she was no less beautiful for that when she started to move. Her dance was slow, like no dance Bilbo had ever seen before among hobbits or dwarves. There was power in her movements as she leapt higher than any dwarf might dream of doing, and held poses that would quite topple Bilbo if he tried them. But beyond that there was poise. She seemed to drift and flow in the steps of her dance, moved by the music of the flute, alone and above all the world around her. Then there was a violin. It joined the gentle song so softly and slowly that Bilbo only noticed it when Kili made his bow. For a little while the elf and the dwarf danced around each other. Perhaps it ought to have looked like a mockery. Kili made the same sort of movements as Tauriel, but in his compact muscular form they did not look half as graceful. Yet there was a grace to him, for he turned ever toward his love, like a flower turning toward the sun. As their dance continued, Bilbo began to notice something dwarvish about the way they lifted one another into the air. Tauriel was always an elf in her posing, but Kili's movements began to look much more like what Bilbo was used to seeing when dwarves showed off in their dancing. They complemented one another beautifully, and neither of them looked lonely any longer. Slowly, other instruments joined the song, and the melody changed. The couple changed their dance to match, and Bilbo realized with a laugh that it was a traditional circle dance. He knew it well, for the reel was played almost every time dwarves got together. But as Tariel and Keely clapped hands, spun around their partner, and kicked their feet in time, no one else joined in. Bilbo looked for Feely, but he was the one playing the violin. It seemed like all of the couple's allies had been carefully placed among the musicians, and there was no one to support the dancing. Well, there was only one thing for it. Catching Thorin by the hand, Bilbo tried to pull him to the dance floor.
"I will not join this dance,"
the king said, and tugging his hand was like trying to pull a brick wall. "Oh, do come!" Bilbo could go alone, of course, or ask another member of the company to join him, but Thorin would be best. "You only stand in the way of Keely's happiness when you stand to the side like a great lump. Dis told me herself he will not love again."
"She cannot be his one,"
Thorin said obstinately.
"Mahal did not make her for him."
"Oh." Bilbo felt very strange suddenly, much more like sitting than dancing, in fact, though he would not abandon Keely. "Then you do not think a dwarf can fall in love with someone who is not a dwarf?" Thorin went very still at that, though Bilbo barely noticed. Of course, Thorin would never fall in love with anyone who was not a very impressive dwarf. That was not new information, and there was no reason for it to make Bilbo's chest clench so. Setting his mouth in a thin line, Thorin pulled Bilbo by the hand, stomping out to the floor and lining up across from Bilbo to join the dance. Once they were out next to the grinning couple, there was no time to be depressed. Bilbo watched Thorin's head bounce a little, counting time, and he clapped his hands just as the music hit the right note. Where Thorin went, others followed. By the time the reel came around again, dozens of couples had joined the floor, dancing merrily all together. Even Nis joined the fun, partnered by Balin. Bilbo had such a good time dancing that he quite forgot Thorin had some joke planned for him until late in the evening when the trap was sprung. The little hobbit was resting his legs on a bench, sipping from a water goblet, and wondering if it might be time to toddle home to bed, when Thorin sat down beside him. Looking up, Bilbo saw that his friends were gathered around. "Quite sadly so for dwarves." Nori and his wife seemed to be having an entirely unrelated conversation with Dory a little distance off. Dwalin was sharpening a knife. Dis and Balin were comparing different ales. Fili, Kili, Tariel, and Bolver were examining Bolver's flute. Overall, it was only Gloin, Oin, Biver, Bumber, and Ori who were staring directly at Bilbo, and Thorin while grinning.
"Bilbo,"
Thorin said, smiling rather aloud himself,
"I would like to give you a gift crafted by my own hand."
With great will, Bilbo did not laugh aloud. Of course! This had said it, a king may give a gift. Not 2 weeks before, Bilbo had confessed that he was used to getting at least a present a week in Hobbiton, and it would be reasonable for Thorin to conclude that he'd missed such things. It was very kind of his friends to think to do this. Bilbo accepted the golden box Thorin handed him with a cheerful smile, though it was so heavy it nearly crushed his legs when he rested it in his lap. Even if he had not been very conscious of the effort his friends were making to embrace his customs, Bilbo would not have flinched to receive the gift. As a Baggins of Bag End, he had learned how to politely accept a matham by the age of 10. "Oh, lovely!" he cried, lifting the heavy golden chain from the box with no little effort. "Look at all those gleaming gemstones! However did you get them to do that? It still bends so easily." The necklace was clearly very valuable. Every thick gold link of the chain was set with a different sparkling stone. Bilbo recognized diamonds, emeralds, rubies, sapphires, opals, and many other jewels besides, each one as big as his thumbnail. As a display of dwarven opulence, you could not ask for better than that chain, which would have looked utterly ridiculous around any hobbit's neck. Not that he could ever wear it about his neck, for the weight of the pendant would surely choke him. It was the size of a salad plate and nearly a handbreadth thick. Bilbo recognized the style of sculpting from the doors of the Culinary Guild Hall, a scene depicted in raised sculpture from a flat backing. He had to admit that it looked very well on doors, but he thought the technique was not quite as suited to crafting things a hobbit would be expected to lift. his biceps strained just levering it up from the box, though he still let the lower edge balance on the lid, supporting some of the weight with his knees. Still, he admired it dutifully. "Oh, what a beautiful scene!" he exclaimed. "I can hardly believe you crafted this yourself, Thorin. See, Ori, come and have a look. That is Erebor and Esgaroth and Mirkwood and the Misty Mountains. I swear you can even see the Shire in this corner over here. It is all the distance that we travelled together. Isn't that a lovely picture? Why, I swear the trees look real enough to climb. And of course I am right here, armoured quite fiercely, if I do say so myself, with Sting in one hand and—" "Oh." Looking up, Bilbo saw Thorin's smile grow so that it showed all his perfect teeth. The king was as proud of himself as if he'd pulled a rabbit from a hat. "It is my acorn," Bilbo said softly. "The one I took from Beorn's house."
"Yes,"
Thorin said.
"I thought it fitting."
"Oh, that is very nice of you to include my acorn." Bilbo looked down at the enormous medallion shyly. Tracing the small golden seed with his fingers, the hobbit said, "I was thinking I might plant it in autumn, here, somewhere on the mountainside."
"Nothing would please me more."
Thorin was so warm, his voice so deep, and Bilbo was so worked up from dancing. If all of their closest friends had not been gathered around watching, Bilbo might have done something very foolish indeed, like offer Thorin the little gold ring in his pocket. Or worse, offer the sorts of things two hobbits might enjoy after a friendly night of dancing. Bilbo's fingers returned to the little carving of the acorn. "Why not try it on?" This said, breaking his reverie.
Excuse me?"
Bilbo could not very well say, "Because I expect it would break my neck." So he needed time to think of a good reason. Pretending not to hear was a little obvious, but it did the job. "Dish!" Balin's scowl was extremely disapproving, but the princess ignored him. "It would be perfectly appropriate for you to put that on now," she pressed, gesturing to the medallion. "There is no need to wait to wear it."
"Oh, I couldn't possibly," Bilbo said quickly. "It would never do. In this waistcoat, it's not nearly nice enough to match. I will have to try it on another day, when I am fancy enough not to look like a wren wearing peacock feathers."
This frowned. Quite a lot of smiles around Bilbo flattened or turned down at the corners, which was the exact opposite of what the little hobbit wanted. Perhaps he ought to simply put the chain on. If he held the medallion in his hands, he did not think it really would choke him. Of course, it would be obvious at once that he could not wear the thing, and that would likely hurt Thorin's feelings even more.
"Do you want to give it back to him?"
Beaufort asked very gently.
"No one will be angry if you don't keep it, Bilbo."
Perhaps Thorin wouldn't be angry, but he would most definitely be hurt. Bilbo resigned himself to a show of hobbit weakness. Fortunately, as he had so many times before, Thorin saved him. Closing the box deftly, Thorin moved Bilbo's hands so that they rested on the lid.
"You will keep it,"
he said, and it was not quite a question. His smile was small, but it was still a smile. Bilbo nodded.
"He will wear it another day,"
Thorin announced. Standing up abruptly, the king smiled tightly at everyone and then quickly walked away. Bilbo felt awful for spoiling their plan. This looked rightfully upset with him. Fili looked confused, and Tario looked very thoughtful. The rest of his friends simply looked awkward, and they wandered away slowly as though not sure what to say. Only Beaufort remained, taking Thorin's seat on the bench next to Bilbo. After a long silence where two different songs played through for the dancers, Beaufort finally spoke.
"A dam back at the Blue Mountains, a good friend of mine, once tried to give me a ring."
"Really? A golden gift, you mean?" That was interesting enough that Bilbo stopped wishing Beaufort would go away so that no one would be around when Bilbo struggled to get up holding his present.
"Yes, it was a lovely thing. Ruby as big as your eye, set in a sterling silver with masterful etchings. As she was a lovely dam, with a beard like a waterfall, and eyes like caverns unknowable. She was quick, as she was kind, and I did not love her. Oh, how it terrified me. I thought I must be her one, you see. The responsibility of that, Bilbo, the weight, was something awful. Knowing that I was her best chance for happiness in this world, even if she was not mine. Well, I could have married her anyway, you know. She wanted children, and so did I. I still do, as a matter of fact."
"You would make a good father," Bilbo agreed. "You didn't accept it?"
"No, too scared. I handed the ring back to her. It was a gift, and you never have to accept a gift. You don't regret rejecting it?
Bolver watched the dancer seriously for a long time.
Perhaps I regret not letting her speak. Turned out, in the end, I was an idiot. She married elsewhere a year later. I spent the whole year thinking I was breaking her heart, when it turned out she just wanted children and knew I did too. If I'd accepted the gift, we might have at least talked about it. Accepting a gift isn't accepting a proposal, it's just allowing yourself to be courted.
Would you have married her if you'd known that you weren't her one?
Bolver grinned brightly. I'd have been a fool to do it. The fellow she married was Bomber. He's her one. They both knew it the minute I introduced them. Might have been a bit awkward if I was married to her at the time.
Laughing in surprise, Bilbo slapped Bolver on the arm. Sounds to me like she chose the better brother anyway.
Chuckling, Bolver agreed. Certainly chose the fatter one.
Well, maybe now that you are a great lord of Erebor, you can fatten up a little and find a wife of your own.
Aye, Bolver said. Maybe I can. But that is not the path to happiness for everyone. If you ever want to talk, Bilbo, I'm here, and I am on your side, if you ever need someone to be. Never doubt it.
Bilbo grinned. I never have.